Jasmine came in through the side entrance with damp hands and a worn backpack, and the professor stopped her at the door, said that she did not belong in her classroom, which was the single worst decision Elena Vasquez would make in 30 years of teaching. The corridor of Riverside Community College was packed. Students with coffee cups and backpacks pushed through the front doors, heading to class, laughing too loud, checking phones. The fluorescent lights above hummed at a frequency nobody consciously registered, but everybody felt somewhere behind the eyes. Jasmine Thompson came through the side entrance. She wore a gray hoodie gone soft from too many washes, the drawstrings replaced with a shoelace because the originals had frayed out. Her backpack was the kind issued by a school supply drive. Single zip, thin straps, a ballpoint label on the front panel. J. Thompson, Section 4B. Her hands were still faintly damp. She had come directly from the Sunrise Diner 3 blocks east, where she worked the 5 a.m. to 7:30 shift washing dishes before the breakfast rush peaked. She moved quietly. She had learned to. She checked the clock above the water fountain. 7:52. Class started at 8. She was fine. She took the left hallway toward room 114, Advanced Calculus, Professor Elena Vasquez, and was 3 steps from the door when a voice stopped her cold. "You're in the wrong hall, sweetheart." Professor Elena Vasquez was standing just outside the classroom door with a leather folio under one arm and a travel mug in the other. She was 55, silver hair pulled into a severe knot at the nape of her neck. She looked at Jasmine the way people look at something already decided. No question in it, just a conclusion. "Custodial access is down that way." She gestured with the mug toward the far end of the hallway. Past the vending machines, through the service door. The students nearby went quiet. Phones came up. Jasmine did not move. "I'm in Advanced Calculus," she said. "Section 4B, 8 o'clock. Elena looked her over once, shoes to face, the way a customs officer looks at a passport, then reached into her folio and produced a paper napkin. She held it out between 2 fingers. "Your hands. Dry them before you touch anything in my classroom. We solve equations with our minds here, not with manual labor." A compressed, uncomfortable sound moved through the crowd, half suppressed laugh, half something nobody wanted to name out loud. Near the back of the cluster, a phone tilted toward Jasmine's face, then another. Someone typed a caption before anyone had said another word. Within 4 minutes, the hashtag #JanitorGenius was already spreading across 3 platforms, and a student had zoomed in on Jasmine's damp knuckles with the comment, "She literally just came from washing dishes, and this professor..." The stream kept running. Jasmine looked at the napkin. She looked at Elena. She took it slowly, dried her hands, folded it once, and put it in the side pocket of her bag. Elena turned to the electronic display panel beside the door, where a rotating board showed the weekly challenge under the heading Unsolvable of the Week, a partial differential equation posted as decoration, the kind of thing meant to impress visiting donors more than teach anyone. "Since you are so determined," Elena said, her tone lifting slightly, the lift of someone who has just gotten what they wanted. "Solve the first line of that equation. 1 line. Get it right, and you can come in." She let the pause sit. "You cannot? Then you are not where you belong." The hallway held its breath. Jasmine looked at the equation on the board. Her eyes moved across it deliberately, not frantically, not performing, the way someone reads something they have seen a version of before. Something crossed her face, too fast to name. She began to speak. "Don't waste our time," Elena said. Flat. Final. It did not need to be loud. Jasmine stopped. She stood there 1 more second. Then she walked through the classroom door, chose a seat in the 2nd row, not the back, not the front, set her bag down, and opened her notebook to a clean page. Nobody stopped her. Elena stayed outside a moment longer than necessary, looking at the equation on the board as if confirming that nothing had changed. Nothing had. Not yet. But a student near the door, Miguel Reyes, 19, who had watched the whole thing from the edge of the hallway with his coffee going cold in his hand, stayed put after Elena went inside. He looked at the equation. He looked at the door Jasmine had walked through. He was not sure what he had just witnessed, but he knew it was more than what it looked like. The story did not start in that hallway. It started 22 years before Jasmine was born, in a house in Macon, Georgia, where a man named Robert Thompson sat at a kitchen table every night with a composition notebook and a ballpoint pen, working through problems that no one had assigned him. Robert Thompson had a 9th grade education and a job on the county road crew. He laid asphalt in the summer and patched potholes in the cold, and he came home in the evenings with gravel dust in the creases of his knuckles. But something had gotten into him in his 30s. Some hook in the mind that caught on mathematics the way some people catch on religion. And he spent the last 30 years of his life filling notebook after notebook with equations, theorems, proofs, and what he called gap fillings. Places where he believed the established methods had skipped over something true. His daughter married and moved north. His granddaughter was born in a hospital in Dayton, Ohio, and named Jasmine. Robert Thompson died when Jasmine was 9 years old, 2 weeks after she had sat on his knee and watched him work through a proof about differential curvature, explaining each step in a voice that sounded the way wood sounds when it settles in the cold. Low, quiet, and certain. Numbers are not symbols, he told her. They are relationships. You are not solving for X. You are finding where things fit. She did not fully understand it then, but it stayed. The voice, the table, the light, the equations moving under his finger across the page. He left her 3 things: a pocket watch with a second hand that ran 4 seconds slow per hour, a factory defect he had never bothered to correct, a Bible with his name pressed into the cover, and 7 composition notebooks filled front to back with his mathematical work. Her mother had called the notebooks his hobby. A cousin who had gone to state college had leafed through one and said, gently, that most of it looked like notation errors. Jasmine had not argued with either of them. She just kept the notebooks. By the fall, she enrolled at Riverside Community College. Jasmine was living in her grandmother Lila's apartment on the 3rd floor of a building on the east side of the city, where the elevator had been out of service since April, and the hallway always smelled like someone was cooking with too much grease and not enough ventilation. Lila Thompson was 68, retired from 30 years as a hotel laundry worker. She moved slowly, the kind of slow that 3 decades of industrial laundry work leaves in a body, permanently. She did not say much. She did not need to. When Jasmine came home from the diner at 7:30 in the morning, Lila would have a bowl of grits covered with a plate to keep them warm, and that was a whole conversation. The arrangement between them was unspoken. Jasmine covered half the utilities with her diner wages. Lila covered groceries and rent from her Social Security check. Neither of them called it a sacrifice. It was simply what the math required. But the math had been getting harder. The August electricity bill came in $40 higher than expected. The summer heat had pushed them to run the window unit more than they had planned, and Jasmine had pushed her payment back 3 weeks, which meant she was short on October now as well. She had not told Lila. She had written the number on the back of a diner receipt and folded it into the front pocket of her backpack, next to the section of her grandfather's 6th notebook she was currently working through. She did not have a laptop. The college's computer lab closed at 9, and her diner shift often ran to 7:30, which gave her 90 minutes on the days she had evening classes. On other nights, she worked at the kitchen table under the light of the stove fixture, the only bulb in the apartment that did not flicker, and she wrote her coursework in a composition notebook of her own. Her math work she did on whatever was available: the backs of grocery lists, order tickets from the diner, the margins of the free newspaper stacked by the laundromat door. She had learned to work in small writing, neat columns, no wasted space. Her grandfather had worked the same way. That night, The night after the hallway with Professor Vasquez, Jasmine got home at 2:14 in the morning. Her knuckles were cracked from the cold water rinse cycle at the diner. She had wrapped them with a strip torn from an old dish towel, and she worked petroleum jelly into the splits with the same focus she brought to everything, pressing it into the skin before the cracks could open further. The grease coated her fingers, and she wiped the excess on the cloth and kept going, because stopping was not a habit she had developed. Lila was still awake, sitting in the small circle of the living room lamp, stitching the torn left strap of Jasmine's backpack with the focused patience of someone who had repaired things her whole life, because replacing them was not an option. "You don't have to do that," Jasmine said. "I'm already doing it," Lila said. Jasmine sat down at the kitchen table and opened the 6th notebook to the page she'd been working on for 2 weeks. Her grandfather's method of error correction in curvature mapping. An approach that did not match anything in her textbook, but that he had arrived at through 10 pages of his own construction, each step annotated in his careful block lettering. She picked up her pencil and worked in the margins, asking the numbers where they fit. His words came back to her the way they always did in quiet hours. Error is where truth begins, not where it ends. He had said it sitting at a table not unlike this one, with the same kind of light, the same kind of night outside. She looked at the symbols on the page, unconventional in their structure, strange in their notation, and as familiar to her as her own handwriting. She kept writing. Not because she could stop and chose not to, because the work did not allow it. Lila finished the stitching, bit the thread, and set the backpack on the chair by the door. "How was today?" she asked. Jasmine thought about the hallway, the napkin, the phones. "Fine," she said. Lila looked at her for one long moment with the quiet attention of someone who has been reading a person's face for 18 years. "Mm-hmm," she said. She went to bed. Jasmine stayed at the table for another hour and a half, the pocket watch open beside the notebook, its second hand ticking 4 seconds behind every minute, steady and patient, and exactly right in the only way that mattered. The first exam in advanced calculus came back on a Thursday. Elena Vasquez handed them back herself, walking between the rows with her folio open, setting each paper face down in front of its owner with the efficiency of someone who had done this so many times that the faces had stopped mattering. A stack of papers, a route between desks, a sequence of small judgments already rendered. When she reached Jasmine's desk, she paused. Not long. 2 seconds, maybe 3. Enough for the students on either side to notice. She set the paper down face down and moved on without a word. Jasmine turned it over. At the top of the page, in Elena's red pen, 100 over 100. Below it, circled twice and underlined, check source. She read those 2 words 3 times. Then she turned the paper face down again. Miguel Reyes, sitting one desk to her left, had caught a corner of the grade before she flipped it. His eyebrows went up. He looked at her. She was already copying notes from the board. 2 days later, Elena called her in. The professor's office was on the 2nd floor, south-facing, with a window looking out over the faculty parking lot. The bookshelves were organized by color and height rather than subject, and the desk was covered with the organized clutter of someone who wanted to be seen as very busy. Elena was already seated when Jasmine arrived, and she did not gesture toward the chair across from her, so Jasmine stood. Elena slid a printed email across the desk without looking up. Jasmine read it. It was addressed to the Academic Standards Committee. The subject line read, Formal Inquiry, Academic Integrity Concern, Section 4B. The body described, in careful administrative language, a student who had performed anomalously on a first-term examination and whose academic background, referenced obliquely as non-traditional preparation, warranted review. The student's name had been redacted, but the course section and exam date were there. There was no ambiguity about who it described. "The committee will review within 30 days, Elena said. Her voice was neutral in the way that careful cruelty is always neutral. If they find sufficient grounds, there will be a formal hearing. If they confirm that the work was not your own, you will be dismissed from the program." She folded her hands on the desk. "Permanently." Jasmine looked up from the paper. "I did not cheat," she said. "I am not the one who decides that," Elena said. And then, with a precision that was its own kind of message, "You should have someone review your preparation materials, in case there are questions." She closed the folder. The meeting was over. Jasmine walked back down the hallway with the email copy folded into quarters in her hand and a flat, cold weight in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. She recognized the shape of it, the accusation that wore administrative language like a coat. She had been in the general shape of this room before, the one where the thing you had earned became the evidence against you. She tucked the paper into the front pocket of her backpack, next to the diner receipt with the electricity number on it, and went to the computer lab before the 9 o'clock close. That same afternoon, the mathematics department's Instagram story updated. A picture of a whiteboard with a partial equation, the kind they posted when they wanted to appear intellectually active. The caption read, "Some talents are unexpected." Comments appeared within the hour. "We all know what that means, LOL." Then, "Which section?" Someone answered, 4B. By the time Jasmine saw it at 9:47 in the computer lab, there were 34 comments under the post, and the phrase, "the dishwasher girl," had appeared 4 times without a single person pushing back. A student she vaguely recognized from the hallway outside room 114 had screenshotted the thread and shared it to a private group chat that apparently included most of the calculus section. She knew this because Miguel Reyes found her in the lab at 9:55 and sat down across from her without being invited. "I don't know if you've seen the department's story," he said. "I've seen it," she said. He was quiet a moment. "Do you want me to say something in the group?" "What would you say?" "That you didn't cheat." "You don't know that," she said. He looked at her steadily. "I watched you finish the last problem set in 20 minutes while I was still on problem 2. I know that." She looked at the screen in front of her. She had pulled up her own exam, reviewing her work line by line, looking for an error that was not there. "Don't say anything yet," she said. Miguel stayed at the table with his own work for the next hour, not talking, just present. It was not much, but it was something she had not asked for and had not expected, and that, in its quiet way, was harder to receive than the accusation. The rumor moved through the department the way these things do, not as a single message, but as a tone, a shift in the room when she walked in. That conversational readiness to say, "Well, I always wondered," before anyone had confirmed a single fact. She was now, formally, a question mark. And question marks, she had learned, were treated differently than people. The department held its quarterly colloquium on the second Friday of October in the Calder Auditorium. 60 seats, floor-level projection, the kind of acoustic echo that made every voice sound slightly more authoritative than it was. The topic listed on the flyer read, "Methodological Dead Ends, Learning from What Doesn't Work." Jasmine almost skipped it. She had a diner shift at 4, and the colloquium ran until 3:30, which gave her barely enough time to walk 3 blocks and change into her work shirt in the bathroom. But Miguel had mentioned it the day before in passing. Vasquez is presenting, apparently on old failed approaches, and something in that phrasing made her decide to go. She came in 2 minutes after it started and took a position near the rear exit, backpack over one shoulder, work shirt folded inside. Elena was already at the front, a remote clicker in one hand, laser pointer in the other. The first 20 minutes were unremarkable. A survey of notational systems tried and abandoned in the 20th century, the kind of academic survey designed to demonstrate expertise as much as it informs. Elena moved through her slides with authority. Faculty in the front row nodded at the appropriate moments. Then Elena reached the final section. "I want to conclude with an example I find particularly instructive," she said. Something in her voice had shifted, a deliberate casualness that, Jasmine would think later, was the sound of someone who had prepared very carefully to sound unprepared. Elena reached beneath the podium and produced a manila folder. From it, she withdrew a stack of photocopied pages, handwritten, tightly packed notation, clearly from a personal notebook rather than a published paper. These pages came to my attention some years ago through a graduate student reviewing donated materials. She set them on the projector, and the image filled the screen. Dense columns of equations in careful block printing. The author was self-taught, no formal training past secondary school. They attempted to construct a method for error correction in curvature mapping as a supplement to standard Riemannian approaches. She clicked to the next slide. 3 central equations circled in red. The errors here are systematic. This person had clearly thought carefully about the problem, but their foundational assumptions are structurally compromised in ways that cannot be corrected without rebuilding from scratch. She let the room look. This is a perfect illustration of how passion without institutional grounding produces sophisticated-looking work that ultimately goes nowhere. The confidence is real. The conclusions are not. She paused. This is work from a place where academics was never the priority. A few people in the front row made the small sounds of people hearing something confirmed. In the back of the room, Jasmine had gone completely still. She recognized the handwriting. Not because she had seen it on a screen before, but because she had sat with it under the light of a stove fixture almost every night for a year. The flat-topped sevens, the slightly elongated equals signs, the particular form he used for the partial derivative symbol that was his own notation, not a standard one. Those were her grandfather's pages. Someone had found them, had copied them, had stood in front of a room of professionals and used them to illustrate failure. She did not move. She stood at the back of the room, and she watched, and she listened. The lesson, Elena said, is not that this person lacked intelligence. It is that intelligence without structure produces the illusion of insight rather than insight itself. She gathered the photocopied pages from the projector tray, and then she looked up. Her eyes found Jasmine's across the full length of the room. The look lasted 1 second, maybe less, long enough to be deliberate. Elena walked from the front of the room directly up the center aisle, pages in both hands, until she was standing 3 feet from where Jasmine stood near the rear exit. The faculty in the front rows turned to see where she was going. The room shifted and followed. Elena held the pages up. Then she tore them cleanly down the center, and tore them again, and let the pieces fall from her hands to the floor between them. "Is this what you are trying to protect?" she said. Her voice was not raised. It was quiet. It was the specific quiet of someone who believes they have already won. The pieces of paper settled on the floor at Jasmine's feet. Somewhere in the room, someone made a sound that was almost a laugh. Jasmine looked at the pieces on the floor. She looked at Elena. She did not pick them up. She did not step back. She stood in exactly the position she had been standing in, with the torn fragments of her grandfather's work scattered between them, and she did not give the room the satisfaction of seeing what was happening behind her eyes. She waited until Elena turned and walked back to the podium. Then she slipped through the rear exit, walked 3 blocks to the Sunrise Diner, and changed into her work shirt in the bathroom. She ran the water and let the steam rise around her hands. Error is where truth begins. Those pages were not a dead end. She had been sitting with them long enough to know that. Whatever Elena Vasquez had performed in that room, whatever those faculty members had nodded along to, it was built on a foundation that was about to prove itself wrong. But she had a 30-day clock on an integrity hearing, and torn paper on the floor of a room she had been standing at the back of. She had to find where things fit. 3 days after the colloquium, Miguel Reyes was the last person in room 114 when he should not have been. He had stayed to finish a problem set, working at the desk nearest the door, notes spread around him, a pencil that kept disappearing under his papers. The main corridor had gone quiet, with that after-8 silence that belongs to institutions settling into themselves, and the fluorescent overheads above were doing their background flicker that he had stopped noticing an hour ago. He was on problem 4, a line integral he kept setting up wrong, when the door opened. Jasmine came in carrying the 6th composition notebook and a can of soda from the lobby machine. She stopped when she saw him.
"Library's closed,"
she said. "I know," he said. "Almost done." She nodded and moved to the far end of the room, near the window, where the sill was wide enough to lay a notebook open. She did not turn up the overheads, just worked under the ambient light from the window and the corridor light coming through the door's glass panel. Miguel went back to problem 4. For a few minutes, the room was quiet, the way rooms are quiet when two people are genuinely focused. Then he heard a soft, rhythmic tick. He looked up. Jasmine had placed something on the windowsill beside her notebook. Small, round metal. A pocket watch. Old style, case open, a short chain pooled around it. She was watching the second hand, but she was not checking the time. He could tell from the way she was watching it, too closely, too specifically, her pencil moving in short marks across the page in rhythm with the watch's movement. "What are you counting?" he said. She did not look up right away. "The drift." "What drift?" "The second hand runs 4 seconds slow per hour. Has since it was manufactured. But the drift is not constant. It is larger in the cold than in the heat. At the temperature in this room right now, it is running closer to 4.3 seconds slow per hour." She tapped the pencil against the page. "I use the variation to calibrate an error margin." Miguel set his pencil down. "Error margin for what?" She turned the notebook toward him briefly, just long enough for him to see the density of the page, the column structure, the careful block lettering at the margins. "My grandfather's method," she said. "The one in those photocopied pages from the colloquium." He looked at the notebook, then at the watch. He felt the shape of something forming in the room, a structure that had been there all along and that he was only now close enough to see. "Those were his pages," he said. "Yes." "And you have been working from them?" "Since I was 9 years old." He absorbed that. The perfect exam score. "I understand the material," she said. "That is all." "That is not all," he said, not as an accusation, but as a fact he was trying to make fit with everything else. "I have been taking math since high school, and I barely got through problem 3. You were done in 20 minutes, and you were right on every one. And the pages Vasquez showed, I went back and looked at them after the colloquium." He paused. "I am not at your level. But the errors she pointed to are not where she said they were." Jasmine was very still for a moment. "You went back and looked," she said. I could not get it out of my head. She picked up the pocket watch and held it out toward him, face up, the second hand moving in its slightly imperfect rhythm. "My grandfather never fixed this," she said. "Not because he could not, because he said the drift was information. It told you something about the environment the watch was operating in. Temperature, air pressure, the way the mechanism wore over time. If you corrected it, you made the watch more precise and the measurement less true." She turned it slightly in the window light. "He called it using error to find what the standard instruments missed." Miguel looked at the watch for a long time. "He was not wrong," he said, finally. "He just had no one who could read what he was doing." "Not everything true gets recognized," she said. She set the watch back on the sill and closed the notebook. Miguel returned to problem 4. He set it up 3 more times and got it wrong in 3 different ways. And at some point he stopped trying to solve it and started thinking about what it would mean for a foundational method to look like a flaw to someone who had never been trained to see it as anything else. He thought about the 30-day hearing clock. He thought about the Riverside Open Math Olympiad announcement on the bulletin board outside the department office, faculty problem submissions, student division, international panel of judges. He thought about what it would mean to be seen in a large enough room by the right people with no way to look away. He did not say any of that yet, but he thought it. The second hand on the watch ticked its steady, imperfect rhythm, 4 seconds behind every minute. 4 seconds slow, every hour, exactly. And not once in 22 years had it missed a beat. The Riverside Open Math Olympiad had been running for 11 years, the kind of regional academic event that mattered enormously within its own ecosystem and barely registered outside it. It was held in Kellner Hall, 400 seats, a proper stage with dual projection screens, and a sound system the AV department had upgraded 2 years prior when a foundation grant came through. The format included a faculty showcase segment in which department members could submit an unsolved problem from their active research, inviting the student competitors to attempt a solution before a panel. It was rarely used. Most faculty were too protective of their open work to display it publicly. But Elena Vasquez had submitted her problem this year, which the department chair had noted in the program with a sentence that described it as an open challenge in applied curvature theory, unresolved after 8 years of investigation. It was printed in the program in a box set apart from the rest, a partial differential equation, clean on the page, and next to it, in italics, no confirmed solution to date. Jasmine had read the program 3 times on the bus ride over. She arrived in a button-down shirt she had ironed against the edge of the bed that morning, clean jeans, and the pocket watch in her shirt pocket. She had not told Lila she was competing. She had told Miguel, who had found the registration form and slid it across the library table with the top section already filled in. She had looked at it for a long moment, then picked up a pen. Her name was third on the student list. The first 2 participants presented adequately. One drew sustained applause. The other drew a 6-minute technical exchange with the visiting judge that was its own compliment. Then Jasmine was called. She walked to the board without looking at the judge's table. She set her notebook on the small ledge at the bottom, open to a page near the back, and she picked up the marker. She turned to face the problem on the screen. Elena's problem. The one from the program, the one that had been open for 8 years. And she began. She did not explain her approach first. She did not announce a methodology. She started where her grandfather had started, in a notebook in Macon, Georgia, with the premise that the standard framework was discarding a measurable variance as noise when that variance was, in fact, carrying information about the curvature environment itself. Her notation was not the conventional form. It was her grandfather's notation, the one from the photocopied pages, the one Elena had presented as evidence of amateur failure. Elena, seated at the far left of the judge's table with her yellow legal pad, sat forward in her chair. That notation is not. Dr. Hendrik Moore, visiting professor emeritus from the University of Utrecht, sitting at the center of the panel, raised one hand, flat palm, fingers together, directed at Elena without ceremony. Elena stopped. The room went quiet. Jasmine kept writing. She moved through the first phase in 7 lines, a reformulation that reoriented the entire problem from error minimization to error information, treating the variance not as interference to be corrected, but as a carrier of data about the curvature system itself. Dr. Moore had set his reading glasses on the table. He was not taking notes. The second phase took 12 lines. By the 9th, the 2 other judges had leaned toward each other in a low exchange. By the 12th, Dr. Moore had pushed back from the table. He stood at the edge of it, arms at his sides, watching the board the way a person watches something they are afraid might disappear. Jasmine completed the final line of the proof and set the marker down. She turned around. Silence. Then Dr. Moore said to the AV technician at the side of the stage, "The library archive file, the donated materials from the Macon collection." He said it quietly, but the microphone carried it. "Can you bring it up?" The technician pulled something up on his laptop. The second screen beside Jasmine's proof filled with a scanned image, a page from a composition notebook, handwritten, dense columns of equations in careful block lettering, the flat-topped sevens, the elongated equals signs. The same notation, the same foundational framework. The same work Elena had held up in the Calder auditorium and torn into pieces on the floor. Now it was on one screen. Jasmine's completed proof was on the other. The auditorium took that in. Dr. Moore looked at Jasmine. "This framework," he said, "where does it come from?" She reached into her shirt pocket and set the pocket watch on the ledge of the board. The second hand turned in its slightly imperfect rhythm, 4 seconds slow, steady, and unhurried.
My grandfather,
She said.
Robert Thompson, Macon, Georgia. He worked on this for 20 years. He never published anything. He never had the credentials to publish anything.
She looked at Dr. Moore, then at the screen showing the old notebook pages, then finally at Elena Vasquez.
He taught it to me when I was 9 years old, sitting at a kitchen table.
Elena was looking at the board. Her legal pad sat in front of her, blank.
You had his pages,
Jasmine said. Her voice was even, not raised.
You photocopied them. You presented them as an example of failure in a room full of people, and you tore them up and dropped them on the floor.
She was not performing anger. She was stating what had happened.
He spent 20 years on work that you dismissed in 20 minutes. And the equation you have been trying to solve for 8 years? She gestured at her completed proof on the board. He wrote the key to it in 2009. In a kitchen, in a notebook, with a ballpoint pen. He just did not know what he had.
She picked up the watch.
You overlooked the one thing my grandfather never overlooked,
she said.
The error. He never threw it away. He always asked what it was carrying.
Elena's face had the expression of someone standing on ground that has just shifted beneath them. Not collapsed, not destroyed, but permanently altered in a way that changes the distance to everything around it. 400 people, and not one of them moved. Then the applause began. Dr. Moore did not take his seat again. He stood at the edge of the judges' table while the applause was still running through the room, and when it settled, he spoke without the microphone, the way voices carry when a room decides to listen. I need to make a statement in my capacity as a guest evaluator and as someone who has worked in this field for 37 years. He looked at both screens, the grandfather's notebook pages on one side, Jasmine's completed proof on the other. What is written on that board is not a student exercise, he said. It is, as far as I can determine in this moment, a complete and valid resolution of an open problem in applied curvature theory. The method it employs is, to my knowledge, original, and the foundational framework behind it is not a failed experiment or a methodological dead end. It is a genuine contribution to the field, one that has been sitting in an archive unrecognized for the better part of 15 years. The room was very quiet. I am formally requesting, he continued, that the proceedings of this event be documented and submitted to the Academic Standards Committee as material relevant to any pending integrity reviews involving the student who has just presented. At the word integrity, the room shifted. Not a sound, a posture change, a breath held differently. Several faculty members in the front rows turned to look at each other. At the judges' table, Elena Vasquez had not moved. Her legal pad was still blank. Then a hand went up in the middle of the auditorium. It belonged to a student, 19 years old, sitting 5 rows from the front. Her name was Destiny Cole, and she had been there in the hallway outside room 114 on the first morning of September. She had been the first one to start a live stream. She had been the one who typed the caption before she knew a single thing about the girl with damp hands and a worn backpack. She stood up. The room noticed.
I was the one who started the video that day,
she said. Her voice was not steady, but it was clear.
In the hallway? I was the first one recording. I wrote the caption about the dishes.
She stopped.
I thought it was funny. I didn't know anything about her. I just saw what I expected to see, and I posted it. And a lot of people shared it because of me.
She looked at Jasmine.
I'm sorry.
The auditorium was silent for 3 full seconds. Then the applause started again. Different this time, slower and more deliberate, the kind that comes from a room that has found its way to something it needed to say. Dr. Harlan Brooks, the college's principal, who had been seated in the 3rd row, stood up and walked to the stage steps. He was 62, broad-shouldered, a man who had spent 4 decades being the fairest person in difficult rooms. "Dr. Moore," he said, "I want to thank you for putting that on the record publicly." He looked at the auditorium. "And I want to assure everyone here that what has been described this afternoon will receive the full attention it requires." He looked at Jasmine. "Miss Thompson, I would like to speak with you after the session, if you are willing." She nodded. The conversation with Dr. Brooks lasted 40 minutes in a small conference room off the lobby, while the Olympiad crowd dispersed in animated clusters through the hallway. Miguel was waiting outside when she came out. "Well," he said. "The integrity hearing is withdrawn," she said. "Effective immediately." He let out a breath that had been sitting in his chest for about 3 weeks. "And Vasquez?" She was quiet for a moment. "There will be a formal review. The colloquium presentation, the photocopied pages, where they came from, how they were used. Dr. Brooks said the department will be examining presentation materials going back 3 years. She did not say more than that. Elena Vasquez came to class the following Monday. Same leather folio, same travel mug, on time. She stood at the front and looked at her roster, and when she reached Jasmine's name, she stopped. "Miss Thompson," she said, "I made an error in my evaluation of your work. I made a separate error in my evaluation of your grandfather's work." She said it to the room, not to Jasmine alone, and whether that was a flaw in her delivery or the closest she knew how to get to facing the full weight of it, only she could say. Both errors were mine. The room was quiet. Jasmine said, "Thank you." Not magnanimously, not with visible emotion, not performing forgiveness she was not ready to give. Just, "Thank you." 2 clean words, the exact amount the moment required, and nothing more. Elena looked at her for a moment. Then she opened her folio and started class. On the department's electronic display board in the hallway outside room 114, the "Unsolvable of the Week" had been updated. Below the new problem, in smaller text that had not been there before, "Suggested by J. Thompson, Section 4B. It was the next step in Robert Thompson's framework, expressed as a question. Dr. Moore had requested it personally. The scholarship came through in November. A Departmental Merit Award, $2,400, dispersed in 2 installments. It was not large. It was enough. Jasmine used the first installment to pay the electricity bill that had been sitting in arrears since August, plus the amount she had fallen behind on through October. She paid it from the computer lab terminal, hit submit, and sat with the confirmation screen for a moment before closing the tab. The second thing she did was walk to the pawn shop on Clement Street. She had the receipt. She had the money. The man behind the counter recognized her face, if not her name, and he went to the back without being asked and returned with a small cardboard box. Inside was a pocket watch. Not the one she carried daily. She had found that one among her grandfather's belongings when she was 12, a second unit from the same production run, the one she used for work. This was the original, the one Robert Thompson had carried in his coat pocket every day for 22 years. The one that had been there when he died. The one Lila had brought here in a hard winter 3 years back, when the furnace broke, and sentiment was not a currency the heating bill accepted. She paid, put it in her jacket pocket, and walked out into the November air. The cemetery was 20 minutes east by bus, through a part of the city where the blocks grew quieter and the yards slightly wider, and the air had a quality that belonged to the spaces between things. Lila came with her. They did not talk much on the bus or on the walk from the gate to the older section. Lila walked with her hand in the crook of Jasmine's arm, Not because she needed the support, but because that was simply how they walked together when they went somewhere that mattered. Robert Thompson's headstone was simple: his name, his years, and below them the line Lila had chosen. He worked with what he had. Jasmine crouched down in front of it. She set the original watch against the base of the stone, case open, face up. The second hand moved in its steady 4 seconds slow rhythm, unhurried and exact in the only way that counted. She let it tick. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, quietly, "They know now. It took a while, but they know." Lila's hand came to her shoulder and stayed there. The wind moved through the dry grass. Neither of them spoke. After a moment, Lila said, "He would have argued about it. Not sadly, just truthfully. He would have said they still did not get it completely right." Jasmine looked at the headstone. "He would have been right." Lila made a small sound that lived just on the edge of a laugh. "Always was." Jasmine picked up the watch and held it for a moment before putting it in her pocket. Not the working watch, the one she used every day, the duplicate. She left the original where it was, resting against the base of the stone, second hand still turning. She would come back for it. But not today. Today it could stay here, ticking its 4 seconds slow rhythm in the November cold, keeping time the way he had always kept it, behind the official count, and more accurate for it. They walked back to the gate in the cold, their breath showing in the air ahead of them, and neither of them said anything else, and the silence was the kind that does not need filling. On the bus home, Lila fell asleep against the window with her coat pulled up around her shoulders, and Jasmine sat beside her and watched the city move past in its late afternoon light. The storefronts and the bare trees and the kids coming out of the middle school on the corner with their backpacks bouncing, not watching where they were going, not needing to, yet. She thought about Devante, the dual enrollment student from the high school program. She had seen him in the hallway the week before, standing outside room 114 with his schedule in his hand, looking at the door the way people look at a place they are not sure they are allowed to enter. She had said nothing then. She had kept walking, but she had thought about it since. Some doors needed someone to open them first. Not all the way, just enough. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon in room 114, Jasmine was at the board, working through a new problem, when she noticed a student in the second-to-last row who had stopped writing. His name was Devante. He was 17. One of the dual enrollment students from the high school partnership program who came to the college 2 days a week and sat in the back with the careful posture of people who are not yet certain they are allowed to take up space. He always chose the seat closest to the door, and he always arrived exactly on time, not early, not late. The timing of someone who had calculated the minimum commitment required to still be considered present. But today he had arrived 4 minutes early. Jasmine had noticed without remarking on it. He had his pencil raised and his notebook open, and he was looking at the board with the expression of someone who has reached the far edge of what they know and cannot see what comes next. His jaw was set. His pencil was not moving. He had the look of a person deciding, in real time, whether to keep trying or to quietly put the pencil down and wait for class to end and never come back. She recognized that look. She had worn it herself once, standing in a hallway with a paper napkin in her hand and a professor's voice telling her she did not belong here. Jasmine set down her own pencil. She walked back to his row without making an announcement or pausing for the room's attention. She crouched beside his desk so she was at his level. "Which part?" she said. He pointed to the middle of the third line, the bridge between the setup and the transformation. "Here. I can't see how you got from one to the other." She looked at it. "That's the part most people skip," she said, "because it looks like it should not work." She took his pencil and wrote 2 lines in the margin of his notebook, just the bridge, just the connection between what he knew and where the problem needed to go. The error in the second term is not a mistake. It is carrying the information you need for the next step. You don't correct it. You use it. Devante looked at the 2 lines in the margin. Then he looked at the board. Then back at the margin. His pencil came down without him deciding to pick it up. Jasmine stood up and handed back his pencil. "Solve just 1 line," she said. "That is all you need. 1 line, and the rest follows from there." She walked back to the board. Behind her, she heard his pencil begin to move. No one laughed. No one looked at Devante the way the hallway had looked at her in September. Phones raised, captions typed, judgments fully formed before anyone had learned a single fact. There was just the pencil moving, and the light overhead, and the equations on the board with their quiet, patient logic, waiting for anyone willing to ask where things fit. The pocket watch in her shirt pocket ticked its 4-second slow rhythm. Still behind, still running.